What was that?
What was what?
Yeah,
Michael Richards.
like a delay between pushing the button and speaking. Owen is connecting now.
Hmm. Okay, I know we still got the
Yeah.
document status first and that stuff.
Plenty of time for Owen.
Yeah, okay, I think it's time right now, so we might as well start. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Acme meeting for IETF 111. The tradition was that the Acme meeting is in the very last slot, but this time we got the one before last slot, so progress. Right, so this is the note. Well, and usually people would yell at me that the font is too small and they can't see it top of the room, but well, since we're all virtual, it can just look closer and see all the text. But anyway, I'm sure you've all seen this text plenty of times this week. So what's on our agenda? Note well, technical difficulties and administrivia like agenda bashing. Then we'll go over the document status for all the working group documents. Then we have two presentations from Owen about Acme integrations and Acme subdomains. And then we should talk about where we go from here. Anything to add? Any agenda bashing? Okay, we'll take silence as consent. So, document status. The extensions to Acme for end user SMIME certificates, also known as Draft IETF Acme Email SMIME, was published in April as RFC 8823. So thank you for the work, Alexei. Second document, an Acme profile for generating delegated certificates, also known as Draft IETF Acme Star Delegation. This has gone through IETF last call, Directorate reviews, ISG reviews. It's in the RFC editor's queue, and I think just yesterday I got the notification that they are now actively editing the document. So thanks to Yaron, Diego, Antonio, and Thomas. Couple more. So Acme challenges using an authority token. Also known as Draft IETF Acme Authority Token, received an AD review in October, and the authors responded to that review in July. So there's going to be a bit of back and forth between the authors and the AD. Hopefully it's progressing soon. TN auth list profile for Acme Authority Token. And Draft Acme Authority Token TN auth list, submitted to ISG review last August, but it's waiting for the other document in order to progress. So that's where we are with these two. Acme Delay Tolerant Network Node ID Validation Extension, Acme DTN Node ID, went through working group last call and was submitted to ISG review. Roman reviewed it just last week. Changes are required. I'm sure this can progress soon. Acme integration, that's the other document that went through working group last call and received all of one review. And I'd like to say one review, not from neither chair nor document author, but then the one review, which was from Deb, so that became chair. So now there's 0 reviews that are from neither chair nor author. So we need more reviews to count this as having working group consensus. Finally, Acme for subdomains, draft real Acme subdomains. They have version 5, not yet adopted. And the Acme extension for single sign-on challenges, draft Biggs Acme SSO, have version 01 published and not much discussion on the list. So I don't know if that's going anywhere. Okay. Any comments before we move on? Okay. So now is the time for presentations. Move, close this deck, share the other deck. So, yeah. Owen? Owen, if you're talking, we're not hearing you. I'm still not hearing Owen.
Oh, not hearing me?
Oh, now we are.
There you are. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting intermittent network problems. You hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so update here. Can go to the next slide. So this is the informational draft. It describes how Acme can be integrated with multiple different search and device enrollment mechanisms, ESG, risk cloud, and TEEP. Next slide, please. So what's changed since IETF 110 and draft 03? And we've added an explicit section on Acme integration considerations and added a few more clarifications here based on some comments and feedback. So clarified for service operators that but the EST or TEEP server operators are expected to be domain owners, and that's so that they'll be able to do challenge proofs and challenge fulfillments and publish DNS records. Clarified for CSR attributes that clients must send the CSR attributes to the typo there. Clients must send the CSR attributes request to EST and TEEP servers. Some clarifications on search change and trust anchors, because Acme may return not just an identity cert, but an identity cert and a chain of certificates up to and potentially including the root, and clarified exactly how that maps into the ESG and TEEP specifications, because the handling is different in both. And a section error handling, and we've given recommended mappings between Acme, CMC, and TEEP error codes. And just any other guidance, and specifically the IDKP CMC RA guide, we've consolidated that into that section as well. Next slide, please. And that is it, right?
All right. So this is a draft that we tried to get through working group last call and didn't get enough reviews. So I guess the question for the room is whether people are willing to read and write reviews. So we could do the show of hand, but let's just say anything at all in the Jabber room, and if we see several replies, then we'll consider it a yes. I'm not seeing any responses in the Jabber room. Okay, here's one from Russ Housley.
So I did look through it again today, and it answered all the questions that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Deb.
Okay, so we have one volunteer to review. I mean, we can retry the working group last call thing and hopefully get more reviews than just Russ. But that's the way it is. So any more comments All right then. Could say Owen, stay on stage because you're doing the next one too, but it's not really a stage. So let's get to this other thing. That's the Acme subdomains. And I'm sharing it now. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, please.
All right.
So at a high level, what this does, it specifies how a client can perform a single authorization against a given authorization domain name, and then request multiple certs for identifiers in the domain space subordinate to that, without having to perform explicit authorizations for all of the subordinate identifiers. And then the use case where we think this will be most applicable for us anyways that we have in mind is for certificates for large numbers of devices. So a registrar could do one authorization for a domain namespace and then get device certificates for hundreds or thousands of devices under that domain. Okay, next slide, please. So changes, we've reordered some sections and clarified the examples. We're using closer terminology alignment with the CAB guidelines. You'll actually see this in the protocol on the next slide as well. We could arguably do more to align terminology, but we've made some rewrites and changes to align more closely with CAB terminology. On pre-authorization handling, we've explicitly clarified what the mechanism is for a client to specify it wants to pre-authorize for the domain namespace support to a given identifier. And for new order handling, based on the feedback last time around, we have specified a mechanism for a client to specify the exact domain namespace it controls that contains the identifier it wants to search for. If you want to the next slide, we'll show you exactly what this means. So these are screenshots taken from the draft. Under the new authorization payload, there is a Boolean flag indicating whether this pre-authorization is for a domain namespace. So for everything underneath the indicator identifier. For the new order payload, we need to be a bit more explicit because the identifier is there, and we also can't just, based on feedback last time, we can't just say we want it, that the client controls all the way up to the top level domain, and we need to explicitly provide a mechanism for the client to specify where in that tree it has control over. And so domain namespace here is just it's an authorized domain name, which is the topmost domain is the domain that the client has control over. And then finally, in the authorization object, we've included a Boolean flag, similar to the wildcard feed, and the Boolean flag indicates whether that authorization object and that identifier, whether it's for the full domain namespace underneath that identifier. Next slide. And you can just see an example of what the request and responses would look like between a client and a server. So what I'm illustrating here is just a pre-authorization flow. So in step one, the client is doing pre-authorization of the domain. You can see that the domain is example.org. The domain namespace we're specifying is true, the new authorization request. Then the response comes back, and the client creates an authorization object. The client is specifying the domain namespace is, or sorry, the server is specifying the domain namespace is true. And then step two, the client can then present a new order request for a subdomain within that domain namespace. The example we're showing is the subdomain is directly off the domain namespace, or the authorized the topmost domain in the domain namespace. And the client is just specifying the identifier with a value in that domain namespace. And the server is responding with a ready straight away because the client has already completed the authorization for that identifier, or rather it's completed the authorization for the parent ADN for the domain space, that domain namespace that the identifier is in. I think next slide is just questions and next steps, but can you click to the next slide, please? Okay, that's it. Quick updates that addressed the feedback we got last time around.
Okay, so
I think the protocol enhancements are pretty simple.
So you're asking the working group for adoption of this document?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So Comments?
And plus as well, feedback on the exact protocol changes we've made, because we think it addresses all the questions, but feedback on the protocol. There's very simple protocol changes we made.
So, comments? Anything? How many people have? Okay, let's try the show of hands tool. Right. So,
Really?
how many people have read this draft? Starting session. Raise hand if you have read the draft. Okay, that's seven people. Okay, that's a good number. So
There are actually 4 authors, so.
So presumably they're among the 7. For a non-working group document, that's still nice. Okay.
Well, just I didn't raise my hand, and I don't see Richard here, so at least 2 of the authors didn't raise their hands. Anyways.
Sorry, that was my attempt at humor, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Might be too late in the day for you for that.
All right.
So we'll do that on the list later. Any more questions regarding this document? Comments? Michael did raise his hand. Okay. So, thank you, Owen. And now we can get back to the chair slides. And if I remember correctly, we have to go through them right from the start. Yeah. Okay, so next thing is where do we go from here? So this group has very low energy. We've seen that in the working group last calls where we got 2 reviews for one document and 1 review for the other document. That it's really difficult to declare consensus based on that. And on the other hand, we're not likely to ever run out of people wanting either a small extension or some novel use case. I'll use my own employer as an example. We have this storage array with dozens or hundreds of servers, and they should authenticate to each other with certificates, and but they're not the web, so the original Acme is does not really fit in there. So yeah, maybe we want our own things, our own extension, our own method of proving ownership. And yeah, I could write a draft like that, and that would interest probably me, and that's it. So it's hard to justify having a working group with only that kind of work. So the question we want to discuss is whether it's worth continuing as a working group or just dump all those small drafts in Roman's lap. So yeah, go ahead, Michael.
You're absolutely right. So things have been very slow, and I think that there is a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that as things are slow, people are reluctant to do things. My suggestion is not to close the group at this point. I don't know if you have another slide about that, but maybe instead consider virtual interim meetings, which tend to deal away with scheduling conflicts, and just accept the thing. And I guess my question is, would your document actually require any kind of IANA action to proceed? Like, do you actually need to standardize it for your case? Like, I mean, so you said many small extensions, but in some cases, it's unclear whether they actually require any kind of action. I don't know. In your case, would you require an action?
Oh, I didn't really think it through.
Well, then just
So
implement,
yes.
right?
Well, of course. But he's saying that we only need the working group to create documents with IANA actions. I mean, I'm not sure what the registry policy is, but I don't think it's RFC required. Hardly anyone.
Well, okay, so
makes
then
a
maybe
registry with that.
we don't need a lot, but we do need that review. The ISE or whatever is going to still come back and ask us questions. So anyway, I think you should just leave the working group alone for a short while, like a year, and see how we go.
I think the usual thing is to close the working group and then spin up a new one if there's real content, but okay. Yeah, Kathleen.
Good afternoon. So I think energy parts, I had contacted the chairs about putting my draft into last call and was told yes, and it just never happened. And was told, yeah, it had enough review. So if those steps don't get followed through, then I think it's hard to keep energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I guess, if there's no interest in my particular draft, that's a fine outcome out of last call. I'm happy to stop working on it. But if people think it's interesting to have the user one's automated, and I think DigiCert had already done that, then it would be good to just get done with it, right? So I'm just sitting out here waiting for it to go to the last call for a year.
Is that actual active working group document?
I was waiting for you to put it to last call. Nothing was happening with it. So, I mean, I'm not just going to sit around and update and change a space in the document.
Okay.
Right. So that's a reason for lack of energy, right? If you're not getting what you're expecting.
That's it. Okay, that's.
So let me know, and some, if it can go out to the working group to see, I'll happily update it. And if there's no energy to publish it, that is just fine. I'd like an answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Roman.
Yeah, generally speaking, I like all the questions that you asked, and I'm definitely interested to hear if there's additional feedback. My other question to add to the list is, are there latent extensions people want to do that folks haven't kind of spoken up on? Because one other thing I would like to do is, if there's things people want to do, let's batch them up, let's get them kind of listed, and perhaps it might re-energize the working group if we had a list of, I don't know, 4 or 5 things, and we had kind of solid interest in working on those. Because I'm not hearing about additional things to put in scope here other than waiting indefinitely. Thanks.
Okay, and Aaron.
There I am. Yeah, I mean, I was just raising my hand to say, yes, there is some new stuff coming up. In particular, I work for Let's Encrypt, and we have not been particularly active in this group recently, largely due to turnover of people on our group, but we're now in a situation where in the face of a mass revocation event, Let's Encrypt is looking at revoking 200 million certificates all at the same time, and that's a problem. And so we plan to propose, I'm here for the first time to sort of learn how things go, but I plan to have a draft in process and able to be presented at IETF 112 later this year about the Acme renewal info thing that Roland Shoemaker proposed, sort of by the by proposed on the mailing list about a year ago. We hope to develop that into a full draft as a way of communicating more proactively to clients that they should renew their certificates sooner than they originally thought they should.
Mhm. Okay, and would you be open to doing that in an interim rather than at the November meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. Our timeline is not tied to the November meeting. I just need to actually write up a draft, and whenever people want to look at it, then awesome. I also need to learn how to write a draft, but that's a different problem.
Okay, great. So, Philip.
Yeah, this thing about what to do with the end of a security working group always comes up, and every single one that I've been in has tailed away at the end, and I think it's just intrinsic to the way that security things work. You are never done with a security spec. And so I think that as far as the working group is concerned, we've just got to accept that that's just the way that it is. And this is something that we probably should address as a security area issue. And I think that we should have a standing committee for maintaining security specs, because you can never be just done with security. You're always going to be adding new validation methods, you're always going to be adding new algorithms, and you're always going to want to review those. But that's not something we can fix here.
Well, unlike, say, IPsec or PKEX, with Acme, the first document dealt with the web and was the case everyone was interested in. And then said, well, what about mail certificates? Yeah, I guess we can do them too. And then what about my server certificates and the user certificates and all the other kinds of certificates that are hardly ever in use? So there's been a lot less interest. I mean, even with those, one of those late PKEX documents that really were beyond the pale, there were usually about 10 people interested in them. We're not getting that here.
Yeah, I think that in part comes from a misunderstanding about what certs are. I mean, like, because of the way that the web and TLS certs came out, people think of them as server certs. They're not. They're organizational certs, or they are domain certs. They're describing a host that has been validated by some process. For mail certs, you've got a person that's been validated by some person. But when they got tied to their role in the TLS protocol, everybody got confused, and that confusion has stayed with us for 25 years. So I think that some of the low energy may be that some of us just don't believe that this is a separate type of certificate, and maybe we don't show up to say, no, it's the same certificate. You don't need to do this at all. But there are other folk who insist, oh, we've got to have a different way of doing validation for SMTP client auth. We've got to do different DANE or whatever. And I don't think that's useful. But.
All right, thank you. Roman?
About it a little more based on what got said at the mic, and I'm not seeing anyone else kind of coming up here. Perhaps what we can do is, schedule a virtual interim between now and November with the explicit goal of surfacing where is their appetite to do new work, and let's not raise the bar too high to say that you even need to come with a ready draft, but let's talk about what additional scope might be, and let's see what that tells us. If it turns out that there is not a lot more new scope to kind of cover, then this is kind of a question of, do we stay open to do maintenance, and how long we would set a timer for that, if at all. If it turns out we have additional scope, we can kind of have a conversation, then on how much appetite there is, how much more information would we need to reason about that scope. Honestly, I just don't know, but I'd be interested to find out, and I don't want to wait till November.
Okay.
So the
my
other thing
takeaway
is this going to change when the post-quantum algorithms come out? Like, does this protocol change for that? Maybe not.
I think not, because we don't have really we don't really consider algorithms in the Acme work. It was always use a TLS connection, and whatever TLS uses is TLS uses. You sign, if the algorithm changed on the certificate, it doesn't really make any difference. There's still a mechanism for getting certificates. I don't think that's changing, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if someone thinks it's going to, I mean, we could bring it to the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean,
So we
does anyone
definitely
else
have
have?
some things to clear out, right? So we can at least work on those things.
Yeah, definitely. I have no intention of closing a working group where I have active documents, because I desperately need the working group's help to continue kind of processing any feedback we have. So we have kind of time on this, but it's good to start talking
I wouldn't want all
about.
these small documents to being dumped in your lap as AD, which would happen if we just closed the working group,
That's right.
or either your lap or the independent submissions editor.
Right.
Yeah. So, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is on the topic of there being energy for things in general. I think this is a IETF wide thing, not just an Acme working group thing, but in particular, like just a few minutes ago when we were asking for, hey, how many people have read this draft? Who's willing to stand up and do a non-chair review of it? I did not come forward and say I'm willing to do a non-chair review of it, because I don't even know what that process involves yet, right? And so, like, yeah, I and presumably other people like me who are relative newcomers to the space are willing and able to do things, but I don't feel like I've had resources placed in front of me. All of the resources that were placed in front of me were show up to a meeting and see how it goes, and you'll learn everything by watching. And so
I can tell you that a review is just read the document, send an email to the list. That's it. There's no step 3. It's kind of an easy thing. And okay, but I have feeling this is one of the casualties of COVID. People are losing energy everywhere. Okay, any more? Roman, are you still in the queue or just accidentally there? Okay, so I guess the usual answer is that we take it to the list and have the discussion there about future of Acme. Isn't that the result of any discussion in meetings? So we're left with just one slide. That's the open mic or any other business. Anything else? Yes, Roman.
That conversation a little bit more. I feel like providing a date for us to have some ideas is better than being open-ended. Otherwise, I feel like we'll just run into November then.
Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing either late September or early October is a good time to have that interim. But of
So
course,
we have actions, right? One is the subdomain document needs to be put out onto the list as a working group draft, or to be made a working group draft. 2 is Kathleen's document, right? Kathleen's document. And then 3 to schedule an interim. I think late September, early October is good. Looks sort of splits the middle between here and November.
Yeah.
And then possibly when we look for meeting time in November, we need to be, I gather it's quite difficult to not have conflicts at all. It sounds like we've been subject to conflict issues.
Right.
I don't know whether there's a way to fix that or not.
There's less slots with this format we have, and so there's bound to be collisions. We used in the physical meetings, we'd have like about 5 or 6 sessions in parallel. Now we have 8 or 9, I think, and so there's bound to be more collisions than we used to have. Yeah. So, Michael.
Just to say that actually in physical sessions we've had historically 8 common patterns, so conflicts will continue. If anything, you can attend 2 sessions much easier in the virtual scenario than physically. But anyway, that's why I suggest that we have a virtual interim, because they don't tend to have any conflicts. A topic that I would like to bring to the next meeting, and I believe the document was just released this week, which is why I couldn't do it earlier, is that there isn't a question of how do we connect to devices on your local LAN with, that have 1918 addresses that we'd like certificates for. And the IoT Security Foundation has a working group which is proposing a number of different things. And I think it'd be very valuable to bring that to this working group because there are some overlaps with using the Acme protocol and some ways that, we basically said, well, you could do this, but that would be really stupid. And we'd like to have more people, agree with the stupidity of it. But it may be the only answer. So anyway, so that's just an issue that I think I would like to bring up. I don't know if it results in any IETF documents, but I think that it would be very useful to be able to discuss it in this fora.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Okay, so anything else? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you all for coming, and we've got a bunch of discussions to continue on the list. Thank you all. Bye.